This is the Tyre Kickers, classic car chat with Max and Matt.
Welcome to a Tyre Kickers Trade Talk special. I'm Max, and in these specials we talk to the classic car trade about the market and also great classic car picks.
The Tyre Kickers.
Today I'm in Oxfordshire to look at a modern classic, the L322 Range Rover. So this is a Tyre Kickers Range Rover special brought to you by the letter L and the numbers 322. Now, here's a theory to send Land Rover fans into a tiz. If you want a classic Range Rover, don't buy the Range Rover Classic. I think the best classic Range Rover is the later L322, made from 2001 to 2012. Loved by the Queen, Jeremy Clarkson and Harry Metcalfe, the L322 was probably the best Range Rover design since the original two-door. But with modern engines and gearboxes, they're a better, more drivable car to own than the original classics. I've come to Full Fat 4x4 to meet the boss James, who specialises in L322 and L405 Range Rovers. So let's get started. This is going to be a deep dive into Range Rover specs, engines and trim levels. But the first and most obvious question is, why is the L322 such a great Range Rover?
They are fantastic vehicles to drive. They're great to own. They're actually quite easy to work on. It does take a bit of kind of getting into them, but once you kind of know where everything is, they are relatively straightforward to work on. They're very easy to live with. They're reasonably economic to run, and also the great thing is that you can get parts for them. You know, there's still loads of different aftermarket part suppliers, and you can still buy new OEM kit.
What is so good about the L322 then? Why do so many people love them as opposed to the Range Rovers before and after?
Yeah, sure. So I think it's that kind of combination of being very easy to live with. They are, I think, more reliable than people like to let on. And they are fabulously comfortable. So you have a really, really nice driving position. You get a captain's armrest on the left. You get really good visibility out over the road. And also the driving style is both sort of very relaxed, but, you know, they all have reasonably big engines in them. So when you punch your foot down, it can be quite a spirited and entertaining drive as well.
What is it about the Range Rovers, though, on the forums? Because I think more than any other car probably on sale in Britain at the moment, they do divide opinion so strongly.
Yeah, I think there's two aspects to that. There's lots of different cars that sit under the Range Rover brand, so Evokes, Sports, as well as the L322. Now, some of those, particularly the Range Rover Sports, have a really poor reputation for just letting go of engines for fun. And I think they all get wrapped up under the Range Rover banner. That having been said, there are, you know, model-specific issues, and you really just have to kind of be aware of them. Some things you can kind of prevent. Other things you'll get a warning. You'll get some notice, and so being aware of those things really improves your chance of a good ownership experience.
Just talk me through the L322, because it had several incarnations as it changed ownership. So just talk me through the history of how the car developed.
Yeah, sure. So it started development in around 2002. That was the sort of pre-production models. And then the first L322s that you could buy were from '03, and that was in the BMW era of Land Rover. So they came with a 3-litre TD6 mated to a 5-speed GM gearbox, or you could have a 4.4 petrol. Then in, I think it was '06, '07, Land Rover changed hands and it became Ford. So the engine lineup changed. You could get a 3.6 TD V8 in the diesels, or you could have a 4.2 supercharged Jaguar engine or a 4.4 petrol Jaguar engine. And then from 2009, actually it was 2010 onwards, that was another sort of cutover year, and it moved into, well, it was Tata ownership, but still using Ford engines. So you had the 4.4 TD V8, and then also the 5-litre supercharged petrol, which was a Jaguar unit.
Here's the big question, though. Which is best?
Yeah, none of them. No, each engine has its pros and cons. I would say if you are a prospective buyer, you need to go and do your own homework and find out what's going to work best for you. I like the diesels, the 4.4s and the 3.6s. They do have their issues that you need to be aware of, but I think they're great engines to live with. Likewise, the 4.2 supercharged and the 5-litre supercharged, great engines, but again, they have their issues and you need to do your homework.
In terms of them as classic cars, what kind of experience do you get as a Range Rover owner?
Yeah, so I think one of the really important things to kind of address here is that the L322 has moved firmly into enthusiast territory. Nobody is impressed by the fact that you have an L322 apart from other L322 enthusiasts, which I think is a really good thing because it means that they don't have any of the pretentious vibe, which perhaps the newer Range Rover lineup has, and they have a reputation for being pavement princesses and people who buy them who don't need them.
What are the things to look out for? What are the kind of main problems with them?
Across the engine range, there are issues that you need to be aware of. So with the 2010 to 2012 range, the 4.4 TDV8 has DPF and EGR, so that's diesel particulate filter and exhaust gas recirculation valves. Basically, it's a Euro 5 car, so it has issues associated with the emission system. The 5-litre petrol had issues with the timing chain, so you need to basically make sure that both of those systems are operable. The 3.6 was known for letting go of turbos, so if you're buying one, probably just budget a new set of turbos. I'd say $4,000 at a specialist, and if you're buying quite a cheap 3.6, well, by the time you've put $4,000 into it, you could still be well under 10K as your overall budget, which I think is still quite a tempting value proposition. And then with the petrols, the earlier petrols, I think the main thing that you need to be looking out for is coolant leaks. The petrols burn much hotter than the diesels, and so they are susceptible to, split coolant hoses, which can be really disastrous for your engine.
And that old Range Rover favourite, rust.
Yes, it is an issue. I think it gets blown out of proportion massively. The cars that I see which have rust issues are really early in the L322 lineup, or which have been living in Scotland for their entire life. So I do think it's blown out of proportion, and I see cars that do need welding tend to be the earliest models. So if you've got a little bit of rust on your 2012 Range Rover, I don't think it's the end of the world, because you might have to do something about it in 5 to 10 years' time.
Why do you like them so much then? Because you used to own a Toyota, and not many people cross from Toyotas to Land Rovers.
Yeah, that's a really good question, Max. Guilty. I did run a Land Cruiser for 10 years. So it was the baby Land Cruiser in the European market called the Prado. In the UK, it's a 120 series. So that's almost equivalent to like the Range Rover Sport. And I ran that for 10 years, loved it, put over 100,000 miles on it. And then one day it let me down catastrophically, and I spent a fortune getting it sorted. And it was sort of at that point that I kind of realized that if I was going to be spending lots of money in an old, unreliable car, I want to be in a really, really comfortable one. And so I bought a 2012 L322, and my kind of journey has just been going since there, really.
Why are your customers buying Range Rovers? What are they using them for? And why do they like them so much?
It's very difficult to put your finger on it other than how they make you feel. And I think that's a very fluffy answer. I'm an engineer by background, so I don't really sort of deal in feelings and touchy stuff. But it is true. It's how they make you feel. When you jump inside of one, you drive it down the road, you do feel like you're captaining a super yacht rather than just jumping in a car and driving to where you need to go. There's a sort of sense of occasion about getting into your L322. I do think it just makes travelling a bit more special.
This is the Tyre Kickers.
If you find car model code sexy, let's face it, who doesn't? Here's a quick rundown on the Range Rover models. The original is now called the Range Rover Classic. Made from 1970 to 1996, it was 2 doors for the first 11 years, then a 4-door from 1981. From 1994 to 2001, it was the P38. Squinting, it looks a bit like the Metro Cab London taxi design, and wasn't a huge hit, although people are starting to appreciate them a bit more now. Like Bentley, for example, who made the Bentayga look a bit like a P38. Then from 2001 to 2012, it's of course the L322, initially a joint Rover and BMW project. Now, Land Rover was sold to Ford during the design process, but a clause kept BMW involved in the Range Rover for a few more years. For example, early electronics came from the E39 BMW 5 Series. Then from 2005, they used Ford and Jaguar electrical systems. From 2012 to 2021, it's the L405 Jerry McGovern design, which used lots of aluminium, making it 40% or 420 kilograms lighter than the L322. which is probably why it drives a bit more like a big car rather than a traditional Range Rover. And the new one with the hidden indicators from 2022, that's been the L460. Right, back to James, and let's talk buying and owning an L322.
If you are thinking about buying a Range Rover, it doesn't matter what type you have to maintain them. They are big, complicated cars from the classic all the way through to the modern era, and you have to stay on top of the maintenance. Otherwise, it will bite you. And it's not just oil servicing. So, they have lots of different systems. Yes, they can be quite troublesome to live with, but there's just nothing like them on the road. There's a real sort of mix of kind of engines across the L322 range. So there's 4.4 BMW units, which were in the the old 6 Series, 7 Series, and the like. There was also the TD6. So that was the same, I think, as an N57 block, which was ubiquitous across the BMW range. Then there was a mix of petrol engines. So there was a 4.4 Jaguar unit, V8 Jaguar unit. Then there was a 4.2 supercharged Jaguar unit, and then it moved into the Fords. So there was the 3.6 diesel that ran concurrently with the 4.2 supercharged, and then in around 09-10, the 3.6 then became the 4.4 TDV8, along with the 4.2 turning into the 5-litre supercharged. So yes, it sort of, the L322 has run across BMW, Ford, and then in the latter years the Tata owned JLR. So yeah, it was a sort of a real, you can see the influence from all the different motor companies in the L322, and actually when you look at parts in the engine bay, you can see a mix of things that say FOMO Co, so Ford Motor Company, and then some bits you can see have got a BMW badge on them, and that kind of theme is kind of apparent throughout the car. You can see where different bits have come from.
So many different engine choices and gearboxes, but what about spec levels? All L322s are pretty well equipped, but if you can spot the difference between an SE and an HSE at 60 paces, you'll know that trim levels matter. So we got out amongst a Vogue SE, a top-spec autobiography, and the run-out Westminster. Right, this is comfortable. Perforated leather.
Perforated leather.
Just describe which model this is we're sitting in now.
Okay, so this is a 2011 Vogue SE, so it has the 4.4 TDV8 Vogue SE. So what that means is it has perforated leather seats, and then the leather style is called semi-aniline. Now, what that means is that they use the sort of finest hides, and they don't do a full tanning process, which means that it's really, really soft. So if you have a good sort of feel of that leather, Max, you'll feel that it's a very, very soft leather, and it's kind of what you might find on a really fine coat. Now, Vogue SE means that you've got your sort of very posh leather seats. There's no piping, so they're fully stitched. There's no piping, and that will make sense to you when you have a look at the Westminster. Being the Vogue SE, it has a leather top dash. However, the lower dash is not leather. It's a sort of rubberized plastic. And then your door cards are mostly plastic as well. You only get the leather door cards in the autobiography.
So just having a quick look around at the spec, sunroof, heated steering wheel,
yes.
Heated seats or cooled seats?
Yes, both heated and cooled seats in the front, and then in the rear you get heated seats. And actually that's an interesting point. So these heated and cooled seats, they're very clever. They use this thing called a Peltier unit, and you basically put current through it one way and it makes it hot, and you put current through it the other way and it makes it cold, which is what gives you that heating and cooled effect. But the quid pro quo to that is that they don't tend to get as hot as the filament only seats that you find in the Vogue. Other things that you kind of get Vogue SE is kind of normal to see. You'll have adaptive cruise control rather than standard cruise control. And then on the rearview mirror, you'll have a home link system, which you can use to link to your garage door, although I've never figured out how to do that.
And just a reminder of this engine, because it's got the pop-up gear knob, so that means it's the 8-speed ZF?
That's correct, Max, yes. So the rotary selector in the later cars from 2010 to 2012 means that it has the 8-speed ZF. So any car with a ZF, 8-speed ZF has the rotary, and then the previous gearbox to that, which was a ZF6 gearbox. So that's from 2010 to 2007, I think is the cutover year. You can tell it has one of those because it has a gear selector and also an electronic handbrake. Then there was the previous ones, which I think was a changeover year 2006, 2007, where it was a GM 5-speed unit, and you can normally tell those ones because they haven't got a electronic parking brake. So you'll see a gear stick and a manual handbrake.
Right, so you've got 3 in the drive. Let's go up to the next spec level, which is the autobiography.
Yes, so from the Vogue SE would be the autobiography.
So what are we at now?
An autobiography, so this is on a 61 plate. This is also a 4.4 TDV8, and it's finished in beautiful colour combination, which is Ipanema sand with Arabica brown leather interior. But it's an autobiography, so sort of key differences beyond the Vogue SE. You'll notice that there is a leather door card, and then the dash, both upper and lower, is leather, and then also the headlining is leather as well. You have the same seats in the autobiography as you do in the Vogue SE, and the principal difference is this extended leather pack. And if someone was to say to me, in one sentence, describe the difference between a Vogue SE and autobiography, extended leather pack plus leather headlining, that's the key difference.
So just more dead cows?
Basically, Max, yes. What that does mean is that autobiographies do tend to have a certain smell to them. And it's, if you kind of think vintage Jaguar, vintage Bentley, it's really interesting because I've had a few in stock and every one of them has smelled the same.
So inside the high luxury of a Westminster. So just talk me through the difference between a Westminster and, say, the SE that we started off in.
Yeah, sure. So the biggest difference, Max, which is most noticeable, is the seats. So you'll notice that these seats are piped. So that means that the edging has a sort of pipe fabric material running around it, which forms the seam. And also the leather type is different. So this is a Windsor leather, and it is a fully cured leather, but this leather is really, really tough, and it is fantastic for an active lifestyle. If you've got kids, dogs, anything like that, it's really scratch resistant. It wears exceptionally well. I mean, this car is from 2012. 83,000 miles on it, and you'd look at some of the seats in here and think, well, this could have rolled out of the factory just yesterday. So I do think the benefit with the Vogues and the Westminsters, which have the same seat leather style, is they do wear fantastically well. But yeah, other than that, this is probably most similar to a Vogue. However, I think the really important thing about any of the spec levels, it really doesn't matter what you buy. You are not going to be shortchanged on luxury. Be it a Vogue, Westminster, Vogue SE, autobiography, they all feel fabulously luxurious. They all have really nice leather. I've never jumped out of a Range Rover of any spec level and thought, oh gosh, that feels like a poverty spec vehicle. It's just not the case. So I would always suggest to people that they focus on history, condition, rather than the trim level. Personally, I would much rather have a vehicle which was a lower trim level, so in this instance the lowest of Vogue, that was in really good condition, had good history, and was a nice colour combination.
In terms of them being classic cars, do you think it matters about the spec level then? Do you think that's going to become more of a collector's car because it's a Westminster run-out edition than, say, just a normal HSE?
That's a really good question, and it's a bit difficult to answer. I think the purists will want the Westminsters and the autobiographies. I think anyone who just wants a good, usable, modern classic, don't be put off by any trim level, buy on condition, buy on history. I think they are actually very well-made cars. I know Land Rovers have got a reputation of being poorly put together. I don't feel that's the case with Range Rovers. I've jumped into many an L322 and thought, this feels much more solidly put together than some modern cars.
We're around the back of the Westminster. This is where Range Rovers normally rust. So do you want to show me this one?
Yeah, sure thing, Max. So this is one to sort of look out for as a prospective L322 buyer. What I've just done is opened the top tailgate, and then at head height you can see the bottom of the tailgate. Now this one has got some signs of bubbling, and you can kind of see where it has been treated. But then this isn't going to be winning any shows, any classic car shows. It's still in okay condition. We've had much worse. So I still think that's probably got another 4 or 5 years of useful life out of it, maybe even more. The other bit to kind of watch out for with respect to rust, and I'm just opening the rear doors, so you'll be able to see down here, kind of between the wheel and the arch, you can see where they kind of rust through on the arch.
Now, interestingly, on the Range Rover Classics, on the first Range Rovers, they used to rot in the tailgate and round the rear wheel arches, so they're rotting in the same place.
They absolutely are, yes. Yeah, it would seem that Land Rover didn't quite get the memo the first time round.
Or the second or the third.
Quite so.
We've talked engines, gearboxes, leather seats and rust. But is the L322 really a better Classic than a Range Rover Classic? I think so. I had a Range Rover Classic for a short while and watched it rust from inside out. And I'm not the only one.
So I have had a Range Rover Classic. I had a 1989 3.5 litre petrol Range Rover, and it was terrible. It's possibly the worst car I have ever touched. Not only did it rust for fun, as you say, the drive was terrible. It was slow. It just drank petrol. The noise wasn't particularly good, and it was just a terrible car, Max. So I, being a very shrewd businessman, managed to lose a fortune restoring that car to an acceptable standard, and then sold it to a friend at a significant loss. But yeah, what it sort of told me was that they're not the way forward, the Classics. They are not good cars. Yes, they look very pretty and they have a certain cachet about them, but they are, I think, they're not good for sort of daily use. They're not very practical for the modern world, I don't think. And I think that the L322 is a much better Classic Range Rover.
So they rust, they break down, they can be complicated and infuriating. So surely the perfect classic car experience. Now my thanks to James, because that's all for this Tyre Kickers Range Rover special. 4Fat 4x4 is on YouTube, so if you want regular Range Rovers in your life, check out James's channel. And of course, please feel free to get in touch with us if you'd like to add or subtract to the great L322 Range Rover debate. Here comes our contact details. Goodbye, see you next time. Here's how to contact us. On Instagram, we are The Tyre Kickers UK, all one word. On Facebook, find us at The Tyre Kickers. That's 3 separate words.